In the autumn of 1849, in a weather-beaten farmhouse on the windswept coast of Downeast Maine, two 14-year-old sisters set off on a path that baffled every doctor who came to see them. Margaret and Prudence Macomber slipped into a prolonged sleep so deep that physicians traveled from Boston and New York to observe it. None left with an answer that satisfied either science or common sense. It hadn't started that way. At first, it was harmless afternoon naps. Then the naps stretched into days. While the girls slept, their breathing turned so light that a mirror held beneath their noses barely filmed with fog. When they did wake up, they described the same vivid dreams, down to details that made witnesses wonder whether the girls were sleeping at all or living a second life together somewhere just beyond ordinary reach. For 7 years, the Macomber twins hovered in that twilight state, their bodies aging in ways that defied easy explanation, while their minds roamed dreamscapes that felt more solid to them than the kitchen floor. When they finally woke for good in 1856, they carried stories and a kind of knowledge that no one could explain as mere dreaming. What follows is their story, pieced together from medical journals, family letters, and the accounts of people who saw it happen. It asks uncomfortable questions about consciousness, sleep, and the edges of human experience. The story begins not with the sisters themselves, but with the place that shaped them, a harsh, beautiful corner of Maine in the 1840s. Eakin Point, Maine, in 1849 felt a step outside of time. The village clung to granite cliffs above the Atlantic, home to fewer than 200 people who worked the sea and coaxed thin soil into giving enough to outlast the winters. The Macomber farmhouse stood at the settlement's edge, a 2-story mix of local timber and fieldstone, its boards silvered by salt spray and years of wind. Ezekiel Macomber brought his family there in 1835, chasing the kind of independence distance can offer. A man of Puritan stock, with ancestors in Massachusetts since the 1630s, he believed hard work, faith, and a wide berth from city life would be enough to raise his children right. His wife, Constance, met the coast on its own terms. She kept the household steady, tended a garden that somehow produced, despite the stingy soil, and served as the community's unofficial midwife and healer. Her herbs and practical remedies filled a gap when the nearest trained physician was days away. Margaret and Prudence were born on an October night in 1835 as one of the worst storms in local memory slammed the coast. They arrived minutes apart, so alike that even their parents struggled to tell them apart at first. Over time, small differences surfaced. Margaret, the elder by a few minutes, had a quiet intensity that made adults feel she was listening to something just beyond the room. She rarely spoke unless addressed, but when she did, her words landed with a gravity that felt older than she was. Her dark eyes suggested a mind always working a step ahead. Prudence, though her sister's mirror in looks, greeted the world head-on. She laughed easily, asked questions in a cheerful torrent, and could repeat a story, song, or poem after hearing it once. Where Margaret absorbed, Prudence engaged. Their bond ran deeper than ordinary sisterhood. They finished each other's sentences, swapped answers without being asked, and traded glances that seemed to carry more meaning than most people could pack into a paragraph. Neighbors said watching them talk was like seeing one person hold a conversation with herself. Beacon Point's isolation meant the girls learned mostly at home, from their parents, and from the few books that came back with infrequent trips to larger towns. Both were quick studies. By 12s, they handled arithmetic, geography, and literature at a level that would have stretched students in city academies. More remarkably, they seemed to share their learning in ways that defied explanation. When Margaret studied a particular subject, Prudence would demonstrate knowledge of the same material, despite never having seen the books or lessons herself. When Prudence practiced writing or arithmetic, Margaret's skills in those areas would improve simultaneously, as if they were somehow sharing the process of acquiring knowledge. The first signs of the condition that would define their lives appeared in the early autumn of 1849. Margaret began experiencing episodes of profound fatigue that would come over her without warning, forcing her to lie down wherever she happened to be standing. These episodes differed from normal tiredness in their sudden onset and the depth of sleep they produced. When Margaret fell into one of these states, she became completely unresponsive to voice, touch, or even physical movement. Initially, Constance Macomber attributed her daughter's condition to the normal changes associated with adolescence, combined with the demanding physical labor required for farm life. But as the episodes became more frequent and lasted longer, she began to worry that something more serious was affecting Margaret's health. Dr. Samuel Morrison, who traveled a circuit that included Beacon Point every few months, examined Margaret during one of his routine visits in October 1849. His findings, recorded in a letter to a colleague in Boston, revealed the unusual nature of Margaret's condition. "The girl displays symptoms unlike anything in my experience," Dr. Morrison wrote. "During her sleeping episodes, her pulse drops to barely 40 beats per minute, yet remains steady and strong. Her breathing becomes so shallow that it's difficult to detect without placing one's ear directly to her chest. Most remarkably, her body temperature drops by several degrees, yet she shows no signs of distress or discomfort when examined." What concerned Dr. Morrison most was Margaret's complete unresponsiveness during these episodes. She didn't react to loud noises, bright lights, or even mild pain that would normally wake the soundest sleeper. Yet when she finally awakened, sometimes after sleeping for 18 or 20 hours, she appeared refreshed and alert, showing no signs of the confusion or disorientation typical of people who had slept for extended periods. By November 1849, Prudence had begun experiencing identical episodes, but timing of her first prolonged sleep was particularly unsettling because it occurred at exactly the same moment that Margaret entered one of her deep states. Constance found both girls lying unconscious in their shared bedroom, positioned identically on their backs, with their hands folded across their chests, breathing in perfect synchronization. Morrison's examination of both twins during a dual sleeping episode revealed physiological changes that challenged his understanding of human biology. Not only did both girls display the same reduced vital signs, but their heartbeats and breathing patterns were perfectly synchronized, as if controlled by a single biological rhythm. When he checked their pulse rates simultaneously, he found them beating in exact unison, something that should have been impossible in two separate individuals. More disturbing was what happened when Dr. Morrison attempted to wake one twin while leaving the other undisturbed. Any stimulus applied to Margaret produced an immediate response in Prudence, and vice versa. If he touched Margaret's hand, Prudence's hand would move at exactly the same moment. If he spoke Margaret's name, Prudence would stir in her sleep as if she had heard her own name being called. "I am forced to conclude," Dr. Morrison wrote in his private journal, "that these girls have somehow synchronized their nervous systems in ways that medical science cannot explain. They appear to be sharing not just the experience of sleep, but the very biological processes that control consciousness itself." As winter approached, the twins' sleeping episodes became longer and more frequent. By December, they were spending more time asleep than awake, sometimes remaining unconscious for 3 or 4 days at a stretch. During their brief periods of wakefulness, they would eat and drink with desperate hunger and thirst, as if making up for the sustenance they'd had missed during their extended slumbers. But it was during these wakeful periods that the twins began reporting experiences that troubled everyone who heard them. They spoke of dreams so vivid and detailed that they seemed more like memories of actual events than products of sleeping minds. More unsettling, they described dreaming the same dreams, sharing experiences in a world that existed only in their sleeping consciousness. "We lived in a house made of glass," Margaret told her mother during one brief awakening in January 1850. "The walls were clear, like windows, but they didn't break when we touched them. Everything outside was different. The trees were taller and had silver leaves, and the sky was a color that doesn't have a name." Prudence continued the description seamlessly, as if recounting her own memory. "There were other people there, but they looked like us when we were older. Some of them wore clothes made of light, and when they spoke, their words sounded like music. They told us we were visitors and that we could stay as long as we needed to learn what they had to teach us. The level of detail in these shared dream accounts was remarkable. The twins could describe the texture of objects they had touched in their dreams, the taste of foods they had eaten in their sleep, and conversations they had held with dream figures who possessed distinct personalities and voices. When questioned separately about the same dream experiences, their accounts matched perfectly, down to specific words and gestures. Dr. Morrison, increasingly convinced that he was witnessing something unprecedented in medical history, began keeping detailed records of the twins' sleep patterns and dream reports. His documentation revealed that their shared dreams followed logical progressions, as if they were living consecutive experiences in an alternate reality, rather than experiencing the random imagery typical of normal sleep. By the spring of 1850, word of the sleeping sisters had spread throughout the region. Families traveling through Beacon Point would make detours to the Macomber farmhouse, hoping to witness the phenomenon firsthand. Some visitors came seeking miraculous healing, believing that the girls possessed divine gifts. Others arrived as skeptics, convinced that the family was perpetrating an elaborate hoax for attention or financial gain. Dr. Harrison Webb, a specialist in nervous disorders from Boston Medical College, made the journey to Beacon Point in May 1850 after hearing reports of the case from Dr. Morrison. His examination of the twins, conducted during one of their extended sleeping periods, provided the first systematic analysis of their condition using the most advanced medical instruments available at the time. Dr. Webb's findings, published in a limited circulation medical journal, documented physiological changes that defied current understanding of human sleep. The subjects display brain activity patterns that are completely unlike normal sleep states, he wrote. While their bodies appear to be in profound rest, their minds show electrical activity consistent with intense concentration and learning. It is as if they are experiencing waking consciousness while their bodies remain in a state of suspended animation. More remarkably, Dr. Webb discovered that the twins' brain activity was synchronized in ways that suggested a shared consciousness. When he attached primitive electrical monitoring devices to both girls simultaneously, the patterns of brain activity showed perfect correlation, as if he were measuring the same mind operating in two separate bodies. The physical effects of the twins' condition became more apparent as months passed. While other children their age showed normal signs of growth and development, Margaret and Prudence seemed frozen in time. Their hair grew at a fraction of the normal rate. Their fingernails required trimming only every few months, and their overall physical development had slowed dramatically. Dr. Webb noted that the girls appeared to be aging at roughly 1/7 the normal rate. After 6 months of their sleeping condition, they looked as if only a few weeks had passed. Their skin retained the smooth texture of younger children, their voices remained unchanged, and their physical strength seemed unaffected by the prolonged periods of immobility. The subjects appear to have discovered, whether intentionally or accidentally, a method of slowing the biological processes that control aging and development, Dr. Webb concluded. If this condition continues, they may remain physically frozen at their current age for years or even decades. As 1850 progressed into 1851, the twins' waking periods became increasingly brief and infrequent. They would sometimes sleep for a week or more, before awakening for just a few hours. During these short periods of consciousness, they seemed more interested in discussing their dream experiences than in engaging with the waking world around them. Their descriptions of the dream world had evolved from simple observations to complex narratives about learning and exploration. They spoke of attending schools where knowledge was transmitted directly from mind to mind, of traveling to places that existed outside normal concepts of geography, and of meeting teachers who shared wisdom about subjects that hadn't been discovered in the waking world. The teacher with the silver hair showed us how plants think. Prudence explained during a brief awakening in the autumn of 1851. Every leaf has its own mind, and when you understand how to listen, you can hear them talking to each other about the weather and the soil and which insects are friendly. Margaret continued the explanation with scientific precision that seemed impossible for a 16-year-old girl from rural Maine. The root systems carry messages like telegraph wires, but instead of electricity, they use chemicals that change color and texture when different information needs to be shared. Each type of plant has its own language, but the basic principles are the same. Dr. Morrison, who had continued to monitor the twins throughout their condition, was amazed by the advanced knowledge they displayed during their brief conscious periods. They discussed concepts in botany, astronomy, and medicine that they couldn't possibly have learned from any books available in their isolated community. When he tested their knowledge by asking specific technical questions, they provided accurate answers that suggested formal education far beyond their circumstances. The twins' condition attracted attention from beyond the medical community. Religious leaders debated whether their prolonged sleep represented divine blessing or spiritual affliction. Some ministers claimed that the girls had been granted special access to heavenly knowledge, while others warned that their condition might be the result of supernatural influences that were not entirely benevolent. Professor Edgar Whitman from Harvard University arrived in Beacon Point in the summer of 1852 to conduct what he called a comprehensive study of consciousness and sleep. His investigation, which lasted 6 weeks, included detailed interviews with the twins during their waking periods and extensive documentation of their physical condition. Professor Whitman's findings challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and identity. These young women appear to have developed a form of shared consciousness that operates independently of their physical bodies, he wrote in his confidential report. During their sleeping periods, they claim to inhabit a consistent alternate reality where they continue to learn, grow, and develop relationships with other conscious beings. What troubled Professor Whitman most was the logical consistency of the twins' dream reports. Unlike normal dreams, which typically involve random imagery and impossible scenarios, their shared experiences followed rational patterns and showed clear progression over time. They could reference previous dream experiences as if consulting actual memories, and their dream world seemed to operate according to consistent physical and social laws. By 1853, the twins were sleeping almost continuously, awakening only once or twice each month for periods lasting no more than a few hours. During these brief conscious intervals, they seemed increasingly disconnected from their physical surroundings and more focused on the experiences they were having in their dream state. Their physical appearance had become truly unsettling. While their bodies remained healthy and showed no signs of malnutrition or disease, they had taken on an otherworldly quality that made visitors uncomfortable. Their skin had developed a translucent quality that revealed the network of veins beneath, and their eyes had grown larger and more luminous, as if adapted for seeing in darkness. Most disturbing was their apparent indifference to pain or physical discomfort. Dr. Morrison discovered that the twins showed no response to stimuli that should have caused them to wake up immediately. They could be moved, touched, or even subjected to mild medical procedures without showing any signs of awareness or distress. The girls appear to have severed most connections between their consciousness and their physical bodies. Dr. Morrison wrote in 1854, "While their bodies continue to function at a minimal level necessary for survival, their minds seem to be operating entirely in whatever realm they access through sleep." The isolation and strangeness of the twins' condition began to take a toll on their family and community. Ezekiel Macomber, who had initially viewed his daughter's condition as a temporary medical problem, became increasingly withdrawn and bitter as the years passed. He stopped participating in community activities and rarely spoke about the twins to anyone outside the immediate family. Constance Macomber bore the primary responsibility for caring for her unconscious daughters, feeding them when they awakened, keeping their bodies clean and healthy, and protecting them from the curious visitors who continued to arrive despite the family's desire for privacy. The constant stress of caring for children who existed in a state between life and death aged her rapidly and left her emotionally exhausted. The community of Beacon Point gradually adapted to the presence of the sleeping sisters, but their existence cast a shadow over the daily life of the settlement. Children were forbidden from playing near the Macomber farmhouse, and adults spoke of the twins in whispers, as if their condition might somehow be contagious. Dr. Morrison's final examination of the twins, conducted in the winter of 1855, revealed that their condition had stabilized at a level that challenged all medical understanding. After 6 years of observation, he wrote, "I must conclude that Margaret and Prudence Macomber have achieved a state of existence that is neither fully alive nor dead in conventional terms. Their bodies survive, but their consciousness operates in a realm that medical science cannot access or understand." A dramatic conclusion to the twins' 7-year sleep occurred on October 15th, 1856, the 11th anniversary of their birth. Without warning or apparent cause, both girls opened their eyes simultaneously and spoke in clear, strong voices for the first time in months. "We're ready to come home now," Margaret said, sitting up in bed as if she had been taking a brief afternoon nap rather than sleeping for weeks. Prudence smiled and stretched her arms as if awakening from the most refreshing sleep of her life. "The teachers said we've learned everything we need to know for now. They told us it was time to return and use what we've discovered." The twins' awakening was as sudden and inexplicable as their long sleep had been. Within hours, they were walking, talking, and eating normally, showing no signs of the muscle weakness or disorientation that should have resulted from years of immobility. Their physical appearance had returned to normal, though they now looked like young women of 21 rather than the 14-year-old girls they had been when their sleep began. Dr. Morrison examined them immediately and found that all their vital signs had returned to normal ranges. Their muscle tone was perfect, their reflexes sharp, and their mental acuity appeared enhanced rather than diminished by their long unconsciousness. Most remarkably, they had grown and developed normally, despite 7 years of minimal physical activity. The twins' account of their experience during the extended sleep period challenged everything that witnesses thought they knew about dreams and consciousness. They described living full, active lives in what they called the learning place, a realm where knowledge existed in pure form and could be acquired through direct mental contact rather than traditional study. "We attended universities that existed in thought rather than buildings," Margaret explained to the assembled doctors and family members. "The professors were beings who had transcended physical existence and devoted themselves to understanding the fundamental principles that govern reality." Prudence continued the explanation with scientific precision that amazed her listeners. "We learned about the connections between all living things, the mathematical relationships that control growth and change, and the methods for using consciousness to influence physical matter. The knowledge isn't just information, it becomes part of who you are." Dr. Morrison tested the twins' claims by asking them detailed questions about subjects they couldn't possibly have studied. Their responses demonstrated mastery of advanced mathematics, detailed knowledge of plant and animal biology, and understanding of astronomical phenomena that wouldn't be discovered by conventional science for decades. The girls have returned from their extended sleep with knowledge that seems to come from sources beyond normal human learning, Dr. Morrison wrote in his final report on the case. "They speak with authority about scientific principles that haven't been formulated, describe historical events that haven't occurred, and demonstrate practical skills that they couldn't have acquired through conventional means." Word of the twins' awakening spread quickly throughout the region. attracting renewed attention from medical professionals, religious leaders, and curiosity seekers. But the family's enthusiasm for sharing their experience lasted only a few weeks. As the implications of what had happened became clear, the Macombers began to withdraw from public attention. The twins themselves seemed uncomfortable with the scrutiny their condition attracted. They answered questions about their experience reluctantly and appeared eager to return to normal life rather than serve as subjects for continued study. When pressed for more details about their dream learning, they would only say that some knowledge was meant to be shared gradually rather than revealed all at once. Professor Whitman, who returned to Beacon Point immediately upon hearing of the twins' awakening, found them changed in ways that went beyond their physical development. While Margaret and Prudence appear to be normal young women, they possess an awareness and understanding that seems inappropriate for their chronological age, he noted. They speak of future events with the confidence of people who have witnesses them personally, and they demonstrate abilities that suggest their consciousness operates according to principles unknown to conventional psychology. The most unsettling aspect of the twins' condition after their awakening was their apparent ability to influence physical events through concentrated thought. Visitors reported that objects would move when the girls focused their attention on them, that plants would grow visibly faster in their presence, and that they could affect the behavior of animals through some form of mental communication. Dr. Morrison documented several instances of what he called controlled psychokinesis during his final examinations of the twins. When requested to demonstrate their abilities, the girls can cause objects weighing up to several pounds to move across the room without physical contact, he wrote. They accomplish this through concentration techniques they claim to have learned during their extended sleep period. Margaret and Prudence also displayed enhanced sensory capabilities that allowed them to perceive things that were beyond normal human detection. They could sense the approach of visitors hours before they became visible, predict weather changes days in advance, and locate lost objects by concentrating on them mentally. The twins appear to have returned from their sleep with senses that operate according to different principles than normal human perception. Professor Whitman concluded. They describe seeing energy patterns around living things, hearing sounds that exist below the normal threshold of human hearing, and feeling emotional states in people who are hundreds of miles away. By the spring of 1857, the Macomber family had made the decision to end their cooperation with outside researchers and return to private life. The constant stream of visitors, investigators, and curiosity seekers had made normal existence impossible, and the twins themselves expressed a desire to use their abilities quietly rather than serve as perpetual subjects for study. Margaret announced her engagement to Thomas Fletcher, a ship's carpenter from a neighboring town who had known the family before the twins' condition began. Their wedding, held in a simple ceremony at the local church, marked the beginning of her transition to conventional adult life. Within months of her marriage, Margaret and her husband had departed for Oregon Territory, where they planned to establish a homestead far from the curiosity and attention that had dominated her recent years. Prudence, however, remained in Beacon Point with her parents. Unlike her sister, she seemed unable or unwilling to adapt to normal waking life after her extended dream experience. She complained frequently of headaches, fatigue, and a sense of disconnection from the physical world that made daily activities difficult. Dr. Morrison's final examination of Prudence in the autumn of 1857 revealed that her body was showing signs of stress that suggested the transition from her prolonged sleep state to normal consciousness had not been entirely successful. Miss Prudence appears to be experiencing difficulty maintaining the biological processes necessary for normal waking life, he wrote. Her body seems to be trying to return to the suspended animation state that characterized her condition during the 7-year sleep period. On December 3, 1857, exactly 14 months after her awakening, Prudence was found dead in her bed, apparently having died peacefully in her sleep. Her death occurred without warning or obvious cause, leaving Dr. Morrison unable to determine what had ended her life. The subject's death appears to have resulted from a complete shutdown of all biological functions, Dr. Morrison recorded in his final notes on the case. There were no signs of disease, injury, or distress. She simply stopped living, as if her consciousness had decided to return permanently to whatever realm she had accessed during her extended sleep. Margaret Fletcher, as she had become, received word of her sister's death by letter several months later. Her response, preserved in family correspondence, revealed her understanding of what had happened. Prudence was never fully comfortable in the waking world after we returned, she wrote to her parents. She often told me that the learning place felt more real to her than this physical existence. I believe she has simply chosen to return to where she was happiest. The surviving medical records from the Macomber case were scattered among various institutions and private collections following Dr. Morrison's death in 1863. Most of the official documentation was lost during a fire at the Maine Medical Society's headquarters in 1887, leaving only fragmentary accounts of what many physicians considered the most significant case study in the history of American medicine. Professor Whitman's comprehensive report on the twins was donated to Harvard University's medical library, where it remained sealed for nearly a century. When the documents were finally made available to researchers in 1950, they attracted immediate attention from scientists studying consciousness, sleep disorders, and what would later be called parapsychology. Dr. Margaret Foster, a neurologist at Johns Hopkins University who studied the available Macomber records in 1967, concluded that the twins had somehow achieved a state of consciousness that allowed them to access information through means that conventional neuroscience couldn't explain. The case suggests that human consciousness may be capable of operating independently of the physical brain under certain circumstances, she wrote. If the documented accounts are accurate, the Macomber twins discovered a method for expanding awareness beyond the normal limitations of individual human perception. Modern sleep researchers have found the Macomber case particularly intriguing because it appears to document a form of shared consciousness during sleep that has never been replicated in controlled laboratory conditions. Dr. Robert Chen, director of the Sleep Studies Institute at Stanford University, has spent over 20 years attempting to understand how two separate individuals could experience identical dreams and maintain synchronized biological functions. The Macomber case represents either the most significant discovery in the history of consciousness research or the most elaborate hoax ever perpetrated in American medicine, Dr. Chen explains. Unfortunately, the lack of surviving physical evidence makes it impossible to verify the claims using modern investigative techniques. Recent advances in neuroscience and quantum physics have provided new frameworks for understanding how the phenomena described in the Macomber case might be possible. Some researchers suggest that the twins may have achieved a state of quantum entanglement between their consciousness, allowing them to share experiences across the boundaries normally imposed by individual brain function. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a quantum physicist at MIT who has studied historical cases of apparent psychic phenomena, believes the Macomber twins may have discovered principles of consciousness that mainstream science is only beginning to understand. If the documented accounts are accurate, the sisters demonstrated abilities that suggest consciousness operates according to quantum mechanical principles rather than classical physical laws, she explains. Their shared sleep state may have created conditions that allowed their individual awareness to merge into a single expanded consciousness. A legacy of the Macomber case continues to influence research into sleep disorders, consciousness studies, and the potential for human beings to develop enhanced perceptual abilities. Several modern cases of synchronized sleep patterns in twins and other siblings have been documented, though none have approached the duration or apparent complexity of the Macomber sisters' experience. Margaret Fletcher lived until 1923, dying at the age of 88 in Oregon. According to family records, she maintained throughout her life that the 7 years she and her sister spent in extended sleep were the most important period of her existence. She claimed that the knowledge gained during that time continued to influence her understanding of the world and her relationships with other people. In her personal memoirs, written late in life but never published, Margaret provided additional details about the experience that she and Prudence had shared. People assume that we were unconscious during those 7 years, but nothing could be further from the truth, she wrote. We were more awake, more aware, more alive than we had ever been in our normal waking state. The physical world seemed like a dim shadow compared to the reality we experienced in the learning place. Margaret's descendants have preserved her memoirs and other family documents related to the twins' condition. In 2003, these materials were donated to the University of Maine's Special Collections Library, where they remain available to qualified researchers studying historical cases of unusual consciousness phenomena. The most intriguing aspect of Margaret's later writings is her claim that the abilities she and Prudence developed during their extended sleep period were not unique to them. She believed that other individuals throughout history had discovered similar methods for expanding consciousness beyond normal human limitations, but that most had chosen to keep their experiences private rather than subject themselves to public scrutiny. The learning place exists outside of normal time and space, Margaret wrote in her final journal entry, completed just days before her death. It can be accessed by anyone who understands the proper techniques and is willing to surrender their attachment to purely physical existence. Prudence and I were not special or chosen. We simply stumbled upon a natural capability that all human beings possess but rarely develop. Recent investigations into the Macomber case have uncovered additional evidence that suggests Margaret's claims about other similar cases may have been accurate. Historical records from various sources document individuals who experienced prolonged sleep states, demonstrated enhanced perceptual abilities, or claimed to have access to knowledge that couldn't be explained through conventional learning. Dr. Amanda Wilson, a historian at Bowdoin College who has spent 15 years researching 19th century medical anomalies, has identified at least 12 cases from the period between 1840 and 1880 that share characteristics with the Macomber twins' experience. There appears to have been a cluster of similar phenomena during the mid-19th century, she explains. Most of these cases were dismissed as medical curiosities or religious experiences, but the pattern suggests that something significant was happening that conventional medicine couldn't understand. The question of what caused the Macomber twins to develop their unusual abilities remains unanswered. Some researchers have suggested that environmental factors specific to their location in coastal Maine may have played a role. The area was known for unusual electromagnetic phenomena, including frequent displays of aurora borealis and reports of unexplained lights over the ocean. Others have proposed that the twins' condition resulted from a genetic mutation that affected their neurological development. The isolation of their community and the tendency for intermarriage among local families could have created conditions that allowed rare genetic traits to be expressed. Perhaps the most intriguing theory suggests that the Macomber twins achieved their extended sleep state through techniques that were known to certain Native American tribes in the region, but were not understood by European settlers. The Passamaquoddy people, who had lived in the area for thousands of years before European colonization, maintained oral traditions about individuals who could travel to other worlds through controlled dreaming. Joseph Dana, a Passamaquoddy elder who has studied his tribe's traditional knowledge for over 40 years, believes the Macomber case may have involved rediscovery of ancient practices. Our ancestors knew how to send consciousness beyond the physical body while keeping the body alive and protected, he explains. These techniques were taught only to certain individuals who showed the proper spiritual development and understanding. According to Dana, The Passamaquoddy traditions describe a realm called the Learning Lodge, where souls could go to receive instruction from ancestral spirits and gain knowledge that would benefit their communities. The descriptions of this realm share striking similarities with the twins' accounts of their dream experiences. The Learning Lodge exists in the space between waking and sleeping, between life and death, Dana explains. Time moves differently there, and a person can spend many years learning while only a short time passes in the physical world. But the journey is dangerous, and not everyone who enters the Learning Lodge is able to return. The possibility that the Macomber twins inadvertently access techniques developed by indigenous peoples adds another layer of complexity to their case. If Dana's interpretation is correct, the sisters may have rediscovered abilities that were once more widely known, but were lost as traditional cultures were disrupted by European colonization. Modern neuroscience has identified brain states that share some characteristics with the condition described in the Macomber case. Deep meditation practitioners, individuals under certain types of anesthesia, and people experiencing some forms of coma have shown similar patterns of reduced physical activity combined with heightened mental awareness. Dr. Lisa Park, a consciousness researcher at the University of California who studies altered states of awareness, has used advanced brain imaging techniques to study individuals who claim to experience consciousness outside their physical bodies. We've documented cases where people show minimal brain activity in regions associated with physical awareness, while maintaining high activity in areas linked to abstract thinking and memory formation, she explains. While Dr. Park's research hasn't replicated the extreme duration of the Macomber twins' condition, it has provided evidence that consciousness can operate independently of normal physical constraints under certain circumstances. The brain is far more flexible than we previously understood, he notes. It's possible that the Macomber sisters discovered a natural ability that we're only beginning to recognize in controlled laboratory settings. The story of Margaret and Prudence Macomber continues to challenge our understanding of human consciousness and the nature of reality itself. Whether their 7-year sleep represented a medical anomaly, a spiritual awakening, or a rediscovery of ancient knowledge, their experience suggests that the boundaries of human awareness may be far more flexible than conventional science acknowledges. Their case raises profound questions about the nature of dreams, the potential for shared consciousness, and the possibility that human beings possess latent abilities that could revolutionize our understanding of what it means to be alive and aware. In an age when neuroscience is beginning to unlock the mysteries of consciousness, the Macomber twins' experience may prove to be far ahead of its time rather than simply a historical curiosity. For those brave enough to consider the implications, the story of the sleeping sisters suggests that reality itself may be far stranger and more wonderful than we have dared to imagine. And somewhere, in the space between sleeping and waking, the learning place may still exist, waiting for others who are willing to surrender everything they think they know about the limits of human experience. What do you think about the Macomber sisters' incredible journey into extended sleep and shared consciousness? Do you believe it's possible for human beings to access other realms of awareness through controlled dreaming? Have you ever experienced dreams so vivid they seemed more real than waking life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if you've ever heard of similar cases in your own family or community. If you found this mystery as fascinating as I did, make sure to subscribe for more stories that challenge everything we think we know about human potential. Hit that notification bell so you never miss these deep dives into America's most puzzling historical cases. And remember, the most incredible truths often hide in plain sight, waiting for those curious enough to look beyond the surface of everyday reality.